What's up? Hello, everyone. Welcome into Fantasy Filmball, the show where we turn movies into sports and sports into something we don't talk about here. My name is Matt.
My name is Dyl, and we're back here again for some more post-can Oscar predictions. We did Best Picture. Why don't we dive inside the 4 acting categories? But before we can do that today, I finally have seen The Life of Chuck. And for me, it's kind of interesting. I've done like a little 180 with this movie, not in terms of Oscar predictions, but in terms of how I think I would feel with it. Because every trailer, every reaction just screamed not really of my interest. And that's kind of how the movie was in the first third, if not the first half. But the final act connected with me to be overwhelmingly positive. But I still do not believe whatsoever in any Oscar prospects for The Life of Chuck.
Yeah, no, it's not an Oscar contender, especially because Neon just has bigger fish to fry.
So why don't we dive inside our acting predictions here today? And we're going to start off with lead actor. Honestly, there's not that much movement in terms of my contenders and my 5. They've just kind of changed a few positions. I still have Jesse Plemons for Begonia at my number 1, and it's the same sentiments from our Best Picture video. I feel like Plemons is someone who has built up a lot of goodwill inside the industry where maybe this doesn't go to a win, but I feel like as long as this movie's a contender, he'll be one of those secure nominations all season long.
I think so too. Now, the thing that we will have to keep in mind with this performance and this role is Plemons is typically like a very understated actor. Even one of his most outrageous roles being Game Night, he's still using his subtlety and his sort of low energy vibe for comedic effect there. With Begonia, the thing that I'm interested to see and the thing that could potentially keep him out of the winning competition is if he's not really chewing the scenery, if he's not having those moments of overacting, going big, if he does play this psychopath conspiracy theorist very subtly, I could see that be detrimental to his win narrative. The only thing in your top 5 that we actually have some tangible information about is Dwayne Johnson in The Smashing Machine.
I know that we're like polar opposites with the trailer. The trailer really hooked me. I am so intrigued for what The Rock is going to do inside this film. I know
What The
there's
Rock
some
is cooking?
rumors. What The Rock is cooking, that's a great call out right there. But like, I know there's some rumors and speculation about some test screenings, but we say this year after year on this channel that test screenings don't always come to fruition the way that you think, because it's a mix of both the film itself as well as what audience they are testing for this. And I will stay with this all season long until this film premieres, whether it's at Venice, at Telluride. They are screening this movie to Rock fans to see how they can do the marketing, to see if they can draw in those big opening weekend sales. Kind of the same thing that we just saw with Materialists, where that film went out in wide release right away. And because more of the general public's watching it, this is not the rom-com with Dakota Johnson, Pedro Pascal, and Chris Evans that they were expecting. There's a little bit more to the story, and they're a little bit more mixed on the film. So I think the live and die factor of The Smashing Machine is who is the first audience to see it, and then what is the rollout like after that. So that's why I still have it up here. I have faith in this film as a whole, not inside Best Picture, but inside the acting, makeup, and potentially screenplay categories. And then, yeah, like you said, the rest of my list is films that we have not really seen much about. Is This Thing On is something I've been rocking with all year. I have no real reason to go away from it at this moment. Will Arnett is someone who's never really been in the Oscar race before, so maybe this is more of a introductory thing of like, hey, you can deliver a performance that we want to acclaim. If Searchlight is championing this as their main dog this season, we've seen Searchlight get extra nominations for their films that may not seem the most necessary on paper. And then just to close out my top 5, George Clooney, Timothée Chalamet, these are movies that we are all expecting to be big, but these are movies that I'm personally not having at the very top of my Best Picture lineup. So if they end up falling out of the Best Picture race, that's where I could see one of these to slip for someone like Jeremy Allen White, DiCaprio, or even Michael B. Jordan.
Just to go back to The Smashing Machine, I think you make a great comparison with Materialists. A24 is trying to position themselves much more as box office players. They are trying to, with their marketing, reach that broader audience. I'm going to be interested to see if this bites them in the ass at all, because they are deliberately mismarketing films. Materialists is a great example of a film that the trailers sold as a completely different thing than what it actually was. It looked so much like Celine Song had pivoted hard into a more populist rom-com type of movie. And Materialists was way closer to Past Lives than I think anyone expected it to be based on the marketing materials. So with The Smashing Machine, we're seeing them advertise a sports biopic that looks like a classic sports biopic. I don't think that's actually going to be what it is. And we've got reports from test screenings that that's not what this movie is. They're deliberately mismarketing this. I wonder how that's going to make it fair with audiences. Now, in terms of Is This Thing On and Will Arnett, while I do think, and I do have Is This Thing On in my top 10 for Best Picture, I have it in screenplay, I just can't imagine Will Arnett being an Oscar nominee in an acting category. I can't imagine this guy in the $1,000 suit being this big acting contender. Maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe he'll really seize the preconceived notions people have of him as a comedian and deliver a performance. But to me, that's Joe Bluth. And I'm struggling to see a world where he can deliver a performance that has the depth to it.
So should
I think he's going to be entertaining. I think he's going to do the role well. I'll believe it when I see it, I guess.
The next ones in line for me are all ones I know a lot of other people out there are probably screaming about. Like Jeremy Allen White, we just got a trailer for Springsteen, Deliver Me From Nowhere. But my same sentiment for this film still holds true. It's Scott Cooper. He has had such a negative track record in terms of expectations and Academy performance, as well as usually in years where one biopic surpasses expectations, the ones that come out next year go below expectations. And I think that the film being potentially 20th century second or third priority is something that doesn't really bode well in terms of its overall perception. And one thing that I will keep harping on that I've mentioned in previous episodes as well is when these biopics succeed at the Oscars, their lead actor is either the winner or the second place in the lead acting category. So if you are a believer in Deliver Me From Nowhere, Jeremy Allen White needs to either be your number one or your number two. And as you see for me, he's my number 6 at this moment. But easily, once we have real reactions come out from this movie, if it is going to a festival, which at the moment I'm not fully buying that it would go to one, maybe Telluride, it's going to be on my outside looking in for a while. And maybe this will be a reverse of Complete Unknown from last year, where I was always on the Complete Unknown train and I was banging the drum for as long as we knew the movie was coming out. And this year, maybe I will be one of the last ones hopping on the Deliver Me From Nowhere hype wagon.
I think that also speaks to the difference that I think the two of us specifically feel about Jeremy Allen White as an actor versus Timothée Chalamet. It's not to say that Jeremy Allen White is not an incredibly talented performer, but to me, this is such a standard case of oh, well, he got the Emmy, and so that means that he's going to be well received by the Oscars, and he's just going to catapult into that. But outside of Kieran Culkin, Emmy to Oscar doesn't work. Having hype on TV does not translate to having hype in film awards. I do have Jeremy Allen White in my top 5, but he's the only nominee that I have for Deliver Me From Nowhere. I do think that movie's going to underperform. And actually, after seeing the trailer, I feel less strong about what he's going to do in this film than before. I'm seeing him. I'm not seeing the boss.
And then some of the other people who are on my outside looking in that I do want to give a shout out to here too is Michael B. Jordan in Sinners. I know that we said originally upon viewing the film that this may be more so of a long shot for him. There's other people who are more standout role inside of this film, and more of the hype and buzz around Sinners is behind Coogler, behind some of the production elements. But I think that if Sinners does turn out to be this top 3 movie, a lot of people are out there projecting for the film that he kind of has to come along, because with the outside of Parasite here recently, a lot of these major top 2 Oscar contenders are bringing along at least one acting nominee. And I feel like at this moment, at least, Jordan makes the most sense among the Sinners cast. We can talk more when we get over to supporting actor, but I think that, especially looking at this lead actor lineup, he is in that realm of where you could easily slide him in and take out someone like The Rock, like Will Arnett, like George Clooney, and have a content 5. I think that also speaks to some of these other outsiders that are on my list, like Oscar Isaac and Frankenstein. It could be Jordan or Isaac's first nomination this year in the lead category, and roles that, on at least first glance, don't scream Academy appeal.
Michael B. Jordan is looking really strong for a Golden Globe drama nomination. Look at some of the films that we have above. We're expecting One Battle After Another, Jake Kelly, Begonia, Marty Supreme. Is This Thing On? We're seeing as a comedy. So if we're taking all of those out of the running for Best Drama Actor, then we I think have an amazing avenue for Michael B. Jordan to get into that Golden Globe nomination. But that said, I disagree with you. I don't think he is the most likely of the Sinners cast to get in. I do think we will have a Sinners nomination for acting. I don't see it being Michael B. Jordan. I really see it being the one that I commonly see cited as the movie stealer, the one who has the biggest moment in the film being the song. We're going to talk about supporting actor later, but Miles Caton, man, I think that he is big in this. We'll talk about it later. Anyways, am I crazy for thinking that Matthew McConaughey has a better chance for The Lost Bus than he does for The Rivals of Amziah King? To be fair, I have stated many times I don't believe that The Rivals of Amziah King is coming out this year. So take that as you will.
If Rivals isn't coming this year, it still has no distributor, it still has no release date, then obviously the film that does have a date from a studio that we have seen a real trailer for is the more likely one. Lost Bus to me just seems less likely as a contender if they're both inside the race, just because it's Paul Greengrass. People always want to project his films to be Oscar contenders, and they usually outside of Captain Felix have underperformed. The Lost Bus is going to follow on that trend.
I kind of agree with you, but the trailer did look much more technically strong than I was kind of expecting it to from a distance. So I am feeling a little bit more confident than I expected to be in The Lost Bus. One last thing worth mentioning before we go on is Leonardo DiCaprio in One Battle After Another. We still have not got any reactions from One Battle After Another, except for a few more test screenings have come in. And the thing that I keep hearing is it's strong and it's more accessible than any of PTA's previous films. So I'm going to be really interested to see when we get some box office numbers. I'm still believing that this is going to really, really underperform, and I don't think that Warner Brothers is going to prioritize it. But I could very well see myself being proven wrong. So moving on to the lead actress category, and the last time that we were here doing this, I got a little crazy and I did go on a full conspiracy rant, only to, at this point, drop that performer down to my number 4 spot. Unfortunately, I'm not able to keep the conspiracy shtick up after Cannes, but, I still got ya top 5. I really want to see some stuff from preparation for the next life. I want to see it get announced for TIFF. I want to see it get announced for some of these other festivals through the fall. I'd love to see it at the New York Film Festival as well. But right now, I'm going to keep her on the lower end. Here's the thing. I have now seen Sentimental Value. And we have now seen the trailer of Wicked for Good. And at this point, just as we do so many years, I foresee a duel to the death basically here between these two performers. Every single year, it feels like we see in the lead actress category a tight finish between two actors that very well could win or could lose. Last year, it was Mikey Madison versus Demi Moore. We've had Michelle Yeoh versus Cate Blanchett. We've had Emma Stone versus Lily Gladstone. This year, I believe it will be Renata Reinsve versus Cynthia Erivo. Both performers who I see being in top 3 Best Picture contenders with Sentimental Value and Wicked for Good, both of whom I think have goodwill in the industry. Renata Reinsve, this would be her first nomination for the Academy Award. However, she has been picking up so much steam internationally and within Hollywood. And the work that she does in Sentimental Value, I personally think is the best of her career. And that's coming from someone who has the worst person in the world in their top 10 movies of all time. And Cynthia Erivo is clearly, from the trailer, giving her all in Act 2 of Wicked. Her performance of No Good Deed sounds absolutely spectacular. And if what you and I are thinking is true, which is that Wicked for Good will be even bigger than the first one, then why wouldn't she be in win contention for this role? It's going to be a fierce battle between the two. But in the end, I have to lean to Sentimental Value, to Renata Reinsve, because as we often see in these tight finishes for an acting category, the winner typically comes from the film that's closer to winning Best Picture, which I do believe is Sentimental Value.
Your last point really encapsulates all my feelings based off of your top 5, is those are 2 films I do believe will be massive in the side of award season. You've obviously seen one of them. Wicked last year I thought would be a little bit bigger than it ended up being in terms of potential for winning an acting award. Obviously Grande was always number 2, but she never won anything. And Erivo, upon initial reaction release, I was like, oh, well, she's right up there with Madison. But it ended up being Demi Moore being the alternative for potential win contention. So I do think that if Wicked for Good holds the buzz from last year and even potentially eclipses it, that she can be number one or number two, then I see that you still have Jennifer Lawrence here in the top five. That makes me happy because I think this
Mm-hmm.
is the avenue for this movie to happen. Again, I don't have it in my Best Picture lineup, but if Lawrence turns out to be movie's savior star, just like Demi Moore was last year, it could help both the film and the performance survive in these two categories.
Well, the way I see it is Jennifer Lawrence is at most Kristen Stewart and Spencer. 2021, that was a year where Neon sort of struck out in terms of their Oscar contenders, right? They had Titan as their Cannes contender. That was a weird one. That wasn't going anywhere near the Oscars anyways. And then their next best shot was Spencer, which was a wildly divisive film. And they pushed it as hard as they possibly could. They gave their all to getting Spencer into the Oscar race. But all they could do with it was Best Actress for Kristen Stewart because the film was just a little bit alienating. The interesting parallel that I think we have between Spencer and Die My Love is not just alienating films that kind of push the audience away with a dynamic performance from its lead performer. In terms of where Neon and where Movie are in their trajectory, very, very similar. If I'm not mistaken, Parasite was Neon's big breakthrough. 2021 was their second time trying to get into the Oscar race. Last year, Mubi had The Substance, which was this immense sensation with the Academy Awards. It was a bigger film than I think anyone expected it to be from Mubi at the beginning of the year. Now, Mubi is coming back for their next try at it, and what I'm seeing the parallel being here between Spencer for Neon and Die My Love for Mubi is that they're coming hot off the heels of a massive Oscar sensation. They are putting their all into a film that no matter how hard they try, will not be an Oscar contender. So yeah, they spent $23 million. They are going to put their whole mubusi into marketing this movie and trying to sell it to awards voters. But it's simply not the type of movie that, regardless of how hard you try, is going to be an across-the-board sensation. All of the money that they put into pushing this film, it's going to end up in Jennifer Lawrence being a low-tier contender for the nomination and absolutely not within the win contention, just as Kristen Stewart was for Spencer back in 2021. Is that going to help the film in other categories? I do not believe so. I would be very, very surprised. And just to round out my top five, the last one I'll mention is Julia Roberts in After the Hunt. Now, I do have two nominations for After the Hunt. I think this gets into acting categories for Julia Roberts and for Andrew Garfield, and I have it nowhere else. But again, we don't have any updates on this one. We haven't seen footage. We haven't got reactions. So this is just gut feeling at this point.
Amazon is a very interesting one to really track their like success at the Oscars because what we've seen more so recently in the last 3 years is them just prioritize one film. The other film that they may have in the race, like Saltburn or Air or Challengers, gets buzz, but ultimately zero reception with the Academy. You go a little bit older with like Sound of Metal and Licorice Pizza. Those years, they successfully got their other film Oscar nominations in above the line categories. With Licorice Pizza's year, they had Being the Ricardos getting 3 acting awards. And then the year with Sound of Metal, they had Borat and One Night in Miami being major Oscar contenders and arguably the first two out of the Best Picture race. So something I said in some previous episodes about, oh, Amazon, MGM focuses entirely on one film. At least that's more so recently, but you just go back 2 extra years and the complete opposite happens there. So I do think that Julia Roberts is a good shout and lead actress, especially with the buzz that we've heard from the trailer. The reception at CinemaCon was very similar to the reception that Conclave had the year prior. I do think the two categories you have it for, with the addition of maybe original screenplay, all seem like they could be major contenders, even with the absence of a Best Picture nomination.
Outside of that top five, I don't feel overly strong about anything. I mean, I've got Jessie Buckley right on the edge for Hamnet. I think she could very easily take out one of my top five, specifically Sabaya, because again, Sabaya is just my gut feeling. It's my big long shot. Could be this surprise out of nowhere sensation, or I could easily see myself being wrong. Amanda Seyfried and Ann Lee. I don't believe in Ann Lee, but She feels like a strong contender at the very least from what I've got here. There's Tessa Thompson and Hedda, which if I already have two Amazon films above this, why would I have Hedda in as well? Jodie Foster in A Private Life. This is a very interesting one because A Private Life got reactions out of Cannes. They were not very strong reactions. The only reason I have Jodie Foster in here is name recognition, and she's doing the role entirely in French. And that's just something that I think is potentially an interesting reason to vote for Jodie Foster or to get her a little bit of publicity behind this role. But man, this is a dry category. Am I missing
Hmm.
anyone?
I think you'll laugh at the two I may recommend here. The
Oh, fucking
first one
Sydney
is,
Sweeney.
well, yeah, Sydney Sweeney is one of them. I
Okay.
think that if this movie does come out, that there is a potential avenue for this to be what we've seen in the past of some of these breakthrough performances that maybe in more mixed of a film, but the performance is getting so much buzz. And maybe it is just like Zendaya and Malcolm and Marie, where it's just like CCA and nothing else, or Golden Globe because of the split. But maybe it could be more if the movie hits a little bit stronger. But that film, as far as I know, still doesn't have a distributor. So a few red flags there. And the other one would be a film that we just got a movie title for and a release date being Catherine Bigelow's A House of Dynamite with whoever the lead may be. If that's Rebecca Ferguson, if that's Greta Lee, if it's anyone else, that's a pretty stat cast. It's one I want to keep an eye out for. Now we at least have a title and a release date, but we still don't really know much of what the plot is about or who is really big in the movie and who's more just like a cameo.
So on both of those points, would love to see Sydney Sweeney get a nomination just so that we could give all of the Oscar nominees a bit of her bathwater in their gift box that they all get for being nominated. I think that's a perfect idea. And then in terms of A House of Dynamite, the October release date feels like it kind of dooms the film because if I'm not mistaken, the only October Netflix release that has ever been Best Picture nominated was All Quiet on the Western Front. And that was not the film that they intended to be their big push at the beginning of the year. At this point, I have no reason to believe that A House of Dynamite would be a stronger contender with an October release than all of the films that they've clearly put into the slots that they have more faith in for awards potential.
Now we are going to flip over to Best Supporting Actress, and I kind of feel lame with the two categories I have because I don't really have much movement because a lot of my potential nominees are stuff that we really haven't seen much for. But my number one is still Ariana Grande for Wicked for Good. We have a trailer. It's showing us that there's going to be a little bit more to what she did in the last one, and she was already number two. There could be a little bit of mentality of like, oh, we've already nominated you before. Do we really need to give you a win this time around? But I also think on the flip side, there's going to be people who are thinking that, and if this movie is top three, and we don't have a real strong competitor who is in a film that's either equally or larger inside the Academy Awards race, because last year Amelia Perez was higher than Wicked was. So Grande is my one. She's probably going to stay my one until at least November when the movie comes out. So this is going to be a pretty boring category for me going forward. I think that you're on the same wavelength.
I'm on the same wavelength for sure. I feel like we have an absurdly low amount of trailers at this point. But one movie that we have seen stuff from is Kiss of the Spider Woman. It's clear that Lionsgate is hinging their entire campaign, marketing campaign, publicity campaign, awards campaign. It's all on the shoulders of Jennifer Lopez.
And what we have seen in the last few years is the supporting actress field is very light in terms of contenders. And I think for the point that you just made is Lopez is going to be the focus of the movie, at least from what we've heard from people who saw the movie at Sundance, is she is the highlight of the movie. And maybe, yes, number two is too high. Maybe she doesn't have a shot to win because I'm not really on that train. But I do feel very safe for a nomination at this point, just because of the lack of giant names in this category. And we do typically have at least four, if not more, non-Best Picture nominees get acting nominations. And I feel like Lopez is a key one this year, that the film is nowhere in the Best Picture race, but she seems very strong in her specific category. But it really hinges on what does this film really do when it comes out. Is it going to be a massive bomb? And will, at least what some of the early reception to this movie is she's almost entirely singing and dancing. Are voters going to want to reward that with a nomination. Let's toss in some films that are bigger inside the race. Maybe Sentimental Value gets 2 nominations. Maybe Jay Kelly brings on another nomination, or maybe a film that we're not even considering at this moment, or performance we're not considering at this moment, leapfrogs and gets in that kind of like Emily Blunt and Oppenheimer, where like no one's taking this for real, and then it just starts to happen, and it's like, oh, well, I guess it's just going to be a nomination.
I see the two Jennifers as being really, really similar, just in the sense of how much money these companies spent on the movies. You're spending 30 million for Kiss of the Spider Woman. Come on. Lionsgate, especially without Michael this year, they're going to put everything. I mean, I said it with Mubi earlier. They're gonna put their whole Lions Gussy into this, or Lions Gattussy. I don't know which one's better, but one of those. They're gonna put everything into it. Personally, I don't have this getting the nomination. I don't have J-Lo in. But I totally see why you do. And I do think that the campaign will be there. But the campaign was there for Hustlers too. And she was a massive critical darling with
Mhm.
Hustlers. And I don't foresee the same thing happening with Kiss of the Spider Woman.
That could totally be the outcome at the end of the day. Going back to 2019, the year where J-Lo was, you could say gatekept. I didn't really love her performance inside of Hustlers, but that year we did have
Boo.
a pretty large group of Academy Best Picture nominees. You had Laura Dern in Marriage Story, Scarlett Johansson and JoJo, Florence Pugh in Little Women. Then you had Kathy Bates getting in for Richard Jewell, which was the big surprise of the morning. And then you had Margot Robbie for Bombshell, which was arguably the number 11 or 12 movie that year. So I think
Mhm.
it really comes down to what does the race look like? Because in recent years, this category has been leaning more so towards those Best Picture nominees. Last year was a 5 for 5 overlap with like Monica Barbaro and A Complete Unknown hopping over people who are not in Best Picture nominees like Jamie Lee Curtis. And then you go to like 2022 and 2023, where you have outliers, but they are very showy performances like Jodie Foster and Danielle Brooks in 2023. And then the year before with Angela Bassett and Hong Chow. So like there is kind of room for both things to really happen. And at least how I'm looking at it is kind of just the depth of this field at the moment. I see 2 performances I feel really good about a nomination, the other one being Emma Stone. And then going down the list, it's just stuff that has massive red flags just because either we don't know much about the movie or we do know about the movie and that's kind of what's putting me off.
Now, the other thing is Emma Stone, Begonia. I've heard lots of people still believing that it's possible they could have rewritten this role to be more of a focus.
Totally.
So it's interesting. We could totally see Emma Stone end up in the lead category, whether it's fraud or whether it's real. But we don't know that yet. So at this point, based on what we know from the movie that this is remaking, Emma Stone has to be supporting.
It really just comes down to how does Focus really want to do their campaign because you can say Emma Stone's last supporting actress nominee, she was the lead of that movie of The Favorite, but the
Yeah.
movie was centered around Olivia Colman, and I think the same thing could kind of happen here where maybe they do beef up her performance, but it is still Jesse Plemons' story at the end of the day.
Now, I want to talk sentimental value because I have both of the sentimental value girls in my top five. And the feeling that I have here is I feel like through the season, Elle Fanning is going to be at all of the industry awards. She's going to get the Golden Globe nomination. She's going to get the Critics' Choice. She's going to get SAG. She's going to get BAFTA. She's going to be everywhere. I think she's going to be the clear choice for sentimental value because she is a big movie star and she has a ton of great scenes in this film and has a lot more emotional depth than you would expect from this specific character. And when I first saw the movie, my reaction initially was I took Inga Ibsdottir Lilius out of my top five. But then I started to see that critics, when they were talking about the movie, were primarily focusing on Lilius. And Elle Fanning was not the one being talked about in reviews as much. And so while it's easy, I think from an awards standpoint, to walk out saying, Elle Fanning is the one. I think what we're going to see is a split between industry and critics. And the way that I see both of these happening in the end is I think the European-centric awards bodies, BAFTA is going to give Inga Ibsdottir Lilius a nomination. EFA, she's going to get a nomination for sure. Critics, we could see genuinely Inga Ibsdottir Lilius could potentially be a critic frontrunner. So that's the avenue that I see for both of them getting a nomination, is just support coming from different places. So I don't see this being Zoe Saldana and Selena Gomez. I'm trying to think of a good example. The one that's coming to mind immediately for me is Sam Rockwell and Woody Harrelson, but that's not quite it.
I do want to put both of them in here. I just don't feel good about taking anyone else out yet. But I think
Right.
at the end of the day, they both will get the nomination. For me, I think a good comparison would be The Power of the Dog with
Oh,
Jesse
right.
Plemons. Elle Finney will be everywhere. I think that she will get the BAFTA. I think she'll get every precursor. But at the end of the day, I think that both actresses probably will be in, especially if Sentimental Value remains as either the number one or the top three in the Best
Mhm.
Picture race. Maybe I'll make the switch right here. Who would you recommend to take out?
At this point, I don't have Blunt in, but I think that just comes down to I'm a little bit lower on the Smashing Machine. Emily Blunt has historically had such a hard time getting nominations. Until Oppenheimer, she was snubbed every single time. So I don't know why the floodgates have to open for Emily Blunt after she gets one nomination for Oppenheimer.
That's a good point. So I'll make a live switch here. Two sentimental value girlies in here and Emily Blunt moving on the outside looking in. But hey, maybe by the time we do our next acting predictions, it's confirmed Begonia, Emma Stone's lead, and then Emily Blunt can come right back in my lineup.
Who
So
knows?
those are my top six at the moment. You've heard my reasons pro and against some of these people. Next in line really just depends on the strengths of their films, like Nina Hoss and Hedda. If Hedda is the Amazon MGM contender that we previously thought it could have been, I think she rises the ranks. And then Laura Dern for both Jay Kelly and Is This Thing On? It's more so which movie is going to be the bigger performance for her. We've heard from test screenings about her role inside of Jay Kelly. We haven't really heard much outside of what Will Arnett's talked about on his own podcast. The same thing I think goes for Rental Family, Rivals of Zion King. Are they real? Are they fake? Kind of figures out. And the only other one I really want to talk about here is with Sinners. I feel like if this movie continues to rise ranks, I don't think she will get the nomination at the end of the day, but I wouldn't be surprised if we have something like last year where like random nominations for specific actresses in movies that they really love, because that's what Monica Barbara was in The Complete Unknown before she got the Oscar nomination. That is what Jamie Lee Curtis was before she started to rack up multiple ones at the end of the day. If anybody really loves Sinners, especially like SAG, I could see a chance where if Sinners is the Best Picture frontrunner, SAG goes all out like they did with Wicked last year, Jonathan Bailey, and just goes every category, we're just nominating you across the board. But she's at my number 10 right now. Maybe that is a little too high, but I can see the avenue for it happening because upon release, that is what a lot of people online were pointing to as one of the best performances inside the movie. But obviously the role isn't as big as some of the supporting actors are inside of Sinners.
That's a really interesting idea, Dylan. We might look back at this as foretelling, because I do think if Sinners does end up being the Best Picture winner, even if it ends up just being top three, we're going to see it get some extra nominations that at this point might be a bit of a head scratcher. At the same time, Emily Blunt was seen as a head scratcher for Oppenheimer. Jamie Lee Curtis was seen as a head scratcher for Everything Ever All at Once. Yuri Borisov, that's another great example. You know, if you are really in win contention, you're going to pick up some of these extra nominations. If we do start to see her show up all over the place in the season, even just here and there, that could be a really big indication of where the tide is going. But very interesting that end of the day, we both agree Ariana Grande is coming for that Oscar. I have no reason to believe she's not going to deliver as good of a performance in For Good as she did in the first film. So fingers crossed.
It would be really interesting if retrospectively if Gascon and Saldana had switched categories, like what a lot of people like yourself who originally saw Amelia Perez at Cannes thought the placements would go. Would Grande be a sweeper, or would somebody still be resistant of like, hey, you're a musician coming to do your first real film performance where you're not playing yourself? Are we going to give you a win off the bat, or would we see some odd wins out there for, I don't even know who would be number three last year.
Hear me out. Carla Sofia Gascon sweeps.
That would be an
That's
interesting thing. Imagine if she was sweeping and then the tweet
and
storm comes out.
dude, that is an interesting alternate timeline. But let's move over to the supporting actor category, where I do have Stellan Skarsgård in the lead here. Some people have argued that he is not just in the lead, but he is a lead. But this is something that we see every year. I mean, last year we had both supporting categories won by a co-lead of the film. Zoe Saldana was a co-lead. Kieran Culkin was a co-lead. He was on screen almost as much as Jesse Eisenberg was, if not more. And Stellan Skarsgård, I would say, is the same. He is possibly on screen more in the film than Renata Reinsve is. But at the end of the day, it is Renata Reinsve's story, and Stellan Skarsgård is sort of the supporting character. Everything that he does supports the larger story, but I do think the fact that he is basically a co-lead makes him even stronger for his awards chances. Not only is this a career best performance, but it's the first time that Stellan Skarsgård, who is an industry legend, mind you, he has been in everything since the 90s, and he's never had the type of role that would garner him this sort of praise. He's usually a character actor who pops up for 5 to 10 minutes and then disappears for the rest of the movie. He doesn't typically get this type of role. Now that he has it, time and time again, we see the industry say, it's your time. You've done it. You have been working and putting in phenomenal work that we haven't been able to award. It's your time. This is J.K. Simmons in Whiplash. He was primarily the same thing as Stellan Skarsgård, did smaller character roles. He's great in them, but he never had a role like Fletcher until Fletcher swept the season with Whiplash. Allison Janney, I, Tonya, another fantastic character actor who had never had the big role that could get that type of praise until I, Tonya, and then bam, it's her. That's Stellan Skarsgård in Sentimental Value. He is the industry legend that people respect, that people want to see on stage, and I've heard a lot of people say that for Adam Sandler and Jay Kelly. I still think even getting the nomination is an uphill battle. I do think he's going to get it finally, but for me, the nomination is the win for Adam Sandler. I think he's respected, but I don't think he's that respected yet. Uncut Gems. That was the moment that I think a lot of people went, Adam Sandler is a serious actor, and yet we still can't reward him because he's still the goofball. And I think now his reputation is going to be strong enough to get the nomination. I personally can't see him get the win.
And I think that makes a lot of sense when you compound that with the fact that Stellan Skarsgård is already getting all this acclaim. And to your other point, that he is an arguable co-lead. Those are two really hard things to go against, especially with a third fact added to that, that the film is so strong in Best Pictures. That's three major W's in one direction, and you already have kind of a roadblock and a hesitation with Adam Sandler. At this moment, I would have Stellan Skarsgård as number one and Adam Sandler down the list.
And I'd love to see Adam Sandler pick up the steam, but yeah, there's just so much going in Stellan Skarsgård's favor. But let's talk Miles Catton. Is it Catton or Caton? I know your hesitation is generally you go away from the young performers. It worked out for you with Dominic Sessa. It worked out for you with Gabriel LaBelle. The thing with Sinners is I do think this is a top 5 Best Picture contender, potentially even higher. This could be number 2. Very possibly could be even number 1. And Miles Catton, I'm just going to bounce
I just
between
checked.
the two.
It's Caton.
Caton.
It's
Okay.
Caton.
Awesome. We're going to stick with that then. Miles Caton, he is a big centerpiece of the film because of I Lied to You, because of the music. And when it comes to the end of the year, and when it comes to the casting category, because they're going to go hard on the idea of casting because of Miles Caton. Finding this kid, putting this kid into such a major demanding role. If you don't believe that this kid is a superstar who is going to change the course of music forever, if you don't believe that, the film falls apart. To put that weight on the shoulders of a first-time actor who's, 18, 19 years old, that's crazy weight to put on someone. And in that perspective, with the casting category, I think if the casting category did not exist this year, Miles Caton would be lower on my list. But with casting, Miles Caton shoots up the list for me.
I think you brought up a really good point about the previous films that I may have been lower on with their actors. The Fabelmans, which by nomination morning was not top 5 anymore, and The Holdovers, which was either arguably number 5 or number 6. And I think that is where it comes down to for Miles here with Sinners, is if Sinners is in fact a top 4, a top 3 movie, he most likely will come along because assumingly at that point he has hit every precursor on the track. LaBelle had only gotten, to my knowledge, if I remember right, had only gotten the Golden Globe, had missed the BAFTA, had missed CCA, had missed SAG. And Sessa, I think, had missed one of those. What's going to come down to for Miles Caden here, and will he be the one to get the early buzz with the critics group to set the tone like last year with Honora, with Yuri Borisov saying like, hey, no, this is the one to focus on? Or will early critics groups favor more so in Delroy's favor? He's been respected, kind of not to the same level as Skarsgård because it's not the biggest performance inside the movie. The same sort of arc of, hey, you've known him, you've seen him his entire career, as well as he got snubbed just a few years ago. This is your chance to reward him in a movie that you already love. My biggest holdup with these two is they both have a lot of things working in their favor. They also have some things working against them. So I have them currently at my 6 and 7. I want to put one in. Maybe I will lean towards Caden here going forward because you make a great point about his scene is the center point in the film. But at the same time, we've seen time and time again that if these young performers are not the winner or the runner up in their category, they get left off, even if they have almost every major precursor like Sessa did in his film being as strong as it was that season. I guess it also comes down to the category competition too, because Sessa was in a stacked year where he missed as well as Charles Melton, where this year, at least looking at this moment, there might be room for them to come in. But as we've said time and time again inside this video, outside of Sinners, most people haven't seen an Oscar contender. We still have an open season of films to come.
I see Caton less as Dominic Sessa and more as Lucas Hedges, because Manchester by the Sea was a top 3 movie by the end of the year. Sinners is at this point poised to be in a similar position end of the year. Now, to round out my top 5, I've got Jonathan Bailey, Wicked for Good. He has more to work with here. We saw him get that SAG nomination last year. He was in the running for basically the only thing he had that was nomination worthy in Wicked Part 1 is Dancing Through Life. He has much more emotional depth in Wicked for Good. The second act is a bigger act for the character of Fiyero, so he has more going for him here, in my opinion. Then I've got Andrew Garfield rounding out my top 5. Now, I don't feel great about Andrew Garfield. It's a good role that does have enough to work with. It's got enough meat to get a nomination. But like we've said before, I don't really believe that After the Hunt is going to be the movie that we expect it to be. I could easily see myself dropping Andrew Garfield at this point, though. This top 5 just makes sense. This top 5 just looks right. It's just a question of what outside of that top 5, like number 6, I've got Stavros Halkias for Begonia. This is a showy role that's going to be goofy. It's going to be funny. It's going to be great comedic relief. But are we really going to give a nomination to one of the hosts of Come Town? Then we've got Fred Heschinger for Preparation for the Next Life, which I will definitely have higher than a lot of other people will. And, you know, maybe the argument here should be if I've got Amazon MGM's prime contender being Preparation for the Next Life, I should have Fred in my top 5 here. And you know what? Live change. I'm going to put Fred Heschinger in over Andrew Garfield because why would I have After the Hunt out of Best Picture and Preparation for the Next Life in if I'm going to have the supporting actors? So I'm going to do that. And after that, we've heard some strong buzz for Sean Penn in One Battle After Another. But if I am going to be a One Battle After Another doubter, I have to be a One Battle After Another doubter almost across the board outside of 1 or 2 categories. And then, of course, rounding out my top 10, I've got the 2 boys from Deliver Me From Nowhere. Like I've said before, I don't believe that much in Deliver Me From Nowhere, and I definitely don't believe in the supporting cast for this, especially after seeing the trailer. It looks like Stephen Graham primarily exists in the film through flashbacks, and Jeremy Strong is just the manager character. So I'm not fully believing it at this point. But that's my top 10. I don't know what else there really is. Maybe Jacob Elordi surprises as Frankenstein's monster. Maybe someone in Marty Supreme is bigger than we think, like Tyler the Creator. Or who knows, maybe Life of Chuck. No, not Life of Chuck. We're not talking about that.
Just to add a few more names to the mix, I'm going to bring up the House of Dynamite again. If this is a player, you could see any of those actors that are in that giant ensemble cast as well as is this thing on with Bradley Cooper. I'm not a huge believer of him coming along this time around because from everything that we know is that he's taking more of a back seat. It's more so just directing, writing. He's also helping out with the cinematography this time around, just like he did on Maestro. But the one I do want to shout out here is a film that we don't know is confirmed for this year, but it has wrapped filming. It is The Wizard of the Kremlin, like I've talked about before, of Jude Law as Vladimir Putin. And for me, this is going to stay in my predictions until we hit Venice. If it's non-Venice, out it goes. In comes maybe a Sinner's Boy, maybe something else that we have more buzz on at this moment, but it is in there as my number 5 slot at the moment until we learn more information because it sounds like such a meaty role. Well, that brings us to the end of this predictions. As always, comment down below where you agree, where you disagree, or maybe there's some films that we didn't mention today that you really believe in their acting prospects. But come back next week. I think we're doing Tex, and by that point, I would have seen F1 and can update on potentially the second Oscar contender to come out theatrically this year.
But anyways, thank you so much for watching. As always, my name's Matt.
My name's Dill, and this has been Fantasy Filmball.